they get the chance. They were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. A voice from the underground, given room to breathe, not be drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been, let this dance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. I have seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me away. To go, leave me, run like you never did. No, believe me, run like you've never run before.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast. It is myself, John Anderson, in the helm once again. You're joining us here on a lovely Wednesday night. Deepest, darkest Scotland is getting wintry. It is blooming cold outside, but we are here to warm the cockles of your hearts with more chat about Scottish rugby and possibly even mentions of some of our wonderful international compatriots. Joining me tonight, I've got the terrible twosome themselves. First of all, I've got Jonny McGinty, resplendent in a Canterbury hoodie. Jonny, good evening.
Good evening, how are you? This is my dotted about the house hoodie.
It looks warm. It looks warm.
It's nice, yeah. It's very nice.
Are you choosing to? Are you heating only that room and the room that your partner's in? Is this the plan?
Yeah, the rest of my family are freezing, but I'm warm. No, I'm not. I'm not doing that. No one phoned the council or anything.
Just to be clear, don't phone any sort of council. Everyone in the McGinty household is safe and well. And also, partner in crime, I saw you boogieing to the theme tune. It's none other than Craig Manson. Craig, how the hell are you, sir?
I'm terrible.
You're terrible?
Yep.
I hope to get onto that.
I'm absolutely terrible. Had a mental busy day today at work, and then I've got to come on this pod and listen to you two plums big up Glasgow because you beat some diddy team from Italy, and then I've got to try and justify why Edinburgh were so rubbish at the weekend against a Munster team who haven't started the URC very well this year. And then I've got to deal with the fact that England might actually get better. So can I just say...
I find that unlikely.
I agree with Jonny.
I find it incredibly just demoralising. And I don't... I'm just...
Craig.
Yeah, I've had enough.
Well, you've made me feel bad for you now.
Yeah.
No, I don't want your sympathy. Don't be sitting there. I don't
I
need
don't
it.
care about your pity.
I don't need your pity.
Don't you worry, Craig. You're not getting mine.
Yeah. How did I ever think that would be any different?
Yeah, Craig has been subject to some dog's abuse on the group chat over the last couple of days. He's done very well not to bite, so I'm interested to see how tonight goes. If you're stumbling upon this podcast for the first time, welcome and strap in. It's going to be a bumpy one. But if you head over to scottishrugbyblog.co.uk, you can check out all the latest views, reviews, and some match stuff on the podcast. You can also head over to patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast, and you can subscribe for £3 a month for exclusive content, including our Hands in the Ruck section, which we'll record just straight after this. We'll continue to go live for our patrons, and we will cut loose. We'll have a wee sweary word, and I'm sure Craig might mention what he actually thinks about Blair Kinghorn's passing technique. So if you are a Patreon, come over and join us for that. You can also, if you're willing to put your hand in your pocket for £5 a month, you can get access to the luxury package where you'll get your name read out in the podcast. And yet again, I'm really terrible at this. I haven't checked to see if anybody's done that. I promise, this is my vow to you guys. Next week, I'm going to go back through, and anybody that has given us the £5 a month for the Doogie Donnelly Lounge, I'm just going to give you a wee shout out just to support you. So that
I'm going to write that down right now.
Yeah.
On promises next week.
I promise. It's like a politician's promise what I'm giving right now. So you can expect me to change it by probably tomorrow. But we'll do our best to do that for you.
It's a web of lies. He lives in his web of lies, Johnny.
Don't you even start, Boyle. We're going to come on to you in due course. So yeah, tonight we're going to have a wee review of the URC at the weekend. We're going to have a wee look at some of the news and reviews that have happened over the week in rugby. I think it's important. This is a Scottish Rugby podcast, but there has been fairly seismic things happening in rugby over the last couple of days. We're going to have a wee discussion about that, and then, as I say, we'll head over to our Patreon only content where we will do our Hands in the Ruck, where we'll set the world of rugby to rights. So does that seem like an agenda, boys? Sound good? Excellent.
I've always said you've got an agenda, Anderson.
Yes. I always say I'm winging it. You always say I've got an agenda. Who might be right?
I was just singing it. I was just had the wee tune of because I thought it was the Agenda Boys, and then I realised it's the Agenda Boys.
And we've named the podcast 8 minutes and 45
Stop the
seconds.
agenda bus. I want to get off.
Agenda bus is coming, and Johnny's got a problem. He's got to say something about Blair Kinghorn.
You can stop now.
I can only hope that was ad-libbed.
I certainly didn't write that rubbish down.
Right, let's talk news first of all. Right, which part of South do you want to start in, Johnny?
Wales.
I mean,
Wales.
yeah, we should probably start with
Wales.
the one that actually sort of makes sense.
The one that sort of makes sense.
Can I just get off my chest, first of all, that Gregor Townsend being the only British head coach still with a job at the end of this autumn is absolutely baffling to me. Like, he's just got better time than the other two, I think, because his job was on the line before the games even started. And then he at least had the sense to bring Finn Russell in with 2 games left and save his job. If anybody in Scotland had memories longer than a month, I think we'd be talking about 3 coaches losing their jobs.
well, some of us have been advocating for that for quite some time, and some of us, even at the end of the autumn, stated that it still wasn't too long to a World Cup. And I was shouted down online. I was absolutely pillared online. You can't possibly, 9 months out from a World Cup, you can't possibly change your coach. The point the RFU made, and we'll come on to Wales in just a second, but the point the RFU made when bagging Eddie Jones, their most successful coach in history, the point they made was that 9 months out, it's happened quite a few times, in that South Africa have done it twice and won the World Cup both times, and England also done it and reached the final, and probably should have won it, let's be honest, if it wasn't for a dubious TMO decision. That was he in touch, wasn't he in touch? Of course he was in touch. We absolutely all know that, but he might not have been. But let's come back to Eddie, because I think he's going to have his own whole section here. Over in Wales, Wayne Pivac, in a surprise to no one, turns out is not cut out for international rugby, as every Welsh person has been telling us for about 2 years. And he has finally got the bullet, and none other than the Messiah himself, Warren Gatland, has marched back to Cardiff to sort all that is wrong in Welsh rugby. Jonny, I'll come to you first. I mean, it means that Scott Robertson's on the market.
Yeah. The England job and the Wales job have both been sorted out in the last week. Rory O'Gara's just signed on to 2027 with La Rochelle. There's like not a lot of coaches and not a lot of jobs left. And at some point, this like insane fairy tale about Scott Robertson is going to come true for someone. And Scotland, I guess, are one of the contenders now. Like, it baffles me where this entire Scott Robertson thing's come from, because everyone thinks they're getting Scott Robertson all the time. Scott Robertson has a job that he likes and he's good at, and he's never been an international coach before. Yet every time someone loses 2 games in a row, all of a sudden everybody in that country goes, you know what's going to be brilliant? We're going to get Scott Robertson. No one's going to get Scott Robertson, and even when they do, no one knows if he's going to be good or not. Like, he could be Bobbins. He could be like the second coming of Wayne Pivac. He's got a really good team with a really solid academy who've been playing together since they were like 7 years old, and have the best pack in Super Rugby and keep winning Super Rugby. And he's a great Super Rugby coach with the best Super Rugby franchise. Wayne Pivac was a great top 14 or Pro 14 coach. He had a really good Scarlets team, and he won a Pro 14 or Pro 12 at that point with them. And then got the Wales job and was absolute dog water. And everyone just seems to feel like with Scott Robertson, it's going to be totally different. I do not understand. Sorry, I've kind of gone off on one about Scott Robertson there. But it's just
we also don't know the state of Scott Robertson curtain game. We don't know how his curtains are.
Well, I mean, we know what his actual curtains are like, don't we?
Well, you can't look at that and look into his steely blue eyes and think, I want to break dance with him.
No, I know that certain pundits on other podcasts would have a lot to comment about Scott Robertson's drapes, but we will concentrate purely on his merit as a rugby coach. Wayne Pivac, as you rightly say, Jonny, came into the role as a successful coach in the Scarlets, played attractive rugby. I was kind of given a remit to revolutionise the way Wales played, because obviously under Gatland, it was Warren ball, or, you know, there's other affectionate terms that we might touch on in Patreon for it, but it was successful rugby, and Pivac came in and you could see what he tried to do in those first. It almost to me strikes me that he was kind of hampered by the players that he had were very suited to Warren ball, and he was kind of hampered by that, and he never seemed to evolve. And the fact you've got a Wales team now losing to Georgia, losing to Italy, who a lot of them look over the hill now, it strikes me there's been no evolution in that Welsh team.
Do you think there's a breakdown in communication, and that no one told Wayne Pivac or nobody checked at the WRU that actually Tadhg Beirne's not available for Wales? And the fact that he built his entire Scarlets Pro 12 winning team around the fact that Tadhg Beirne is an absolutely irreplaceable talent, and then got to Wales and went, oh, hang on. There's a very important piece missing here.
Now, let's be clear. Are you suggesting that Tadhg Beirne is better than Alwyn Jones? Is that what you're saying here?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Like, right
yes,
now,
Jonny.
if you want, of course.
Choose violence. Yes. Oh, that makes me feel good. Yes. If there's any Welsh folks watching tonight, feed me your hate. Bring it. I would like to see that. Craig, what's your take? Wayne Pivac he came into the role. The Scarlets were always an entertaining side to watch, and certainly were the bane of a few Edinburgh sides over the years. But yeah, as Johnny rightly says, it is a bit of a warning shot for anyone thinking we just take a coach from club rugby and throw them into the international scene. Mike Blair.
Yeah, but that's the sort of the. Well, Mike Blair's slightly different because he's been involved in the international scene already. So with Scotland, so it's slightly different. But yeah, I totally agree. It's yeah. But then what Wales don't seem to have, and what is going to be what I guess Gatland always seemed to do quite well was not dealing with all the politics and all the tribalism in Wales. And he just picked a team, win the first game, pick the same team to win the next game, pick a team maybe with a new player in to see what he's going to go like to win the next team. And he got them winning. And I think that I know there's been a lot said this week about it, but I'm a great believer in that there's this 4-year cycle for a World Cup is to coin Johnny's phrase, a load of bobbins for me. I want to see my team win, and I want a coach to come in and win. Now, Pivac got a huge amount of pelters from everybody in Wales about, he shouldn't be, he's using this World Cup cycle as an excuse, etc. But it's what Eddie Jones has done for the last 8 years. He's gone from cycle to 4 years to 4 years. Everything's going to be better when I get to the World Cup. The big difference with, well, first of all, Pivac did he never get to go to a World Cup? Did he go to the 19 World Cup?
Was he in charge for 2019?
No, he didn't, because it was Gatland that went, wasn't he?
Yep.
And then, whereas Eddie has always managed to pull some sort of result out of a World Cup. He seems to be a test match animal. So I'm never one for going back. What I don't seem to understand is that Gatland was done. He was finished. All the Welsh fans had enough of Gatland and this and that and the other. And all of a sudden now it's, the Messiah has returned. So we'll wait and see if I've got a tenner on Rob Howley coming back as well. So
I think the Howley will be back.
That's really bad. That's mean. I'm sorry.
That's what, come on, I was being subtle there, Johnny.
Yeah, it will be really interesting because, as you say, Gatland left the Wales job and it was the brave new dawn of Welsh rugby. And it's funny because I think it'll be interesting to see where Scotland fans end up in this, because I think we are about to change coach at some point in the next year or so. And it'll be interesting to see if we happen to take a Mike Blair or another coach and we have a few bad results. Fans really like winning, as you rightly said, Craig. Fans like winning games of rugby. And it doesn't matter if you're the greatest coach in the world or a totally bang average coach. If you can get a side winning rugby, you'll get the fans behind you. And Warren Gatland plays winning rugby. It's dreadful rugby. It's not entertaining in the slightest. And he's got his work cut out as well, because I think the development of the Welsh team, to me, certainly has moved away from that kind of brute strength, massive bodies. There is some of the old guard, the Gatland era guys still in there, but I think a lot of the players have moved away from that Gatland ball style. And it will be interesting to see if he can create or recreate the magic in some ways with what he's got available to him. I think this is going to be the Cristiano Ronaldo back to Man United scenario. I think we're going to see some fireworks. I don't think this is going to go necessarily that well for Gatland, and I think you might find that
sort out the bin.
He's going to sort out what?
No, sorry, John. Well, he's got to sort out the bin fire that is Welsh rugby at this moment in time.
Well, that's it. Yeah,
and he's well known to have said and has been quoted before that he's not an advocate of the 4-team system in Wales. He wants to lose one team at least, and relocate a few of the teams as well. So, it's going to be really difficult for him. And also the one of the more scary things about it is the fact that I've totally forgot his name. No, Will Rowlands has just signed for Racing.
He's off to Racing, that's right.
You know,
Yeah,
so
and I have to say, like, they seem to have got it sorted for next year and stuff now. But if I was not even just a regional player, if I was a Welsh international player or a fan of one of the regions or a DOR or something, one of the regions, watching on Monday as they wheel out this massive contract they're paying Gatlin before they've even given the regions their budgets, I would be furious. Like, Will Rowlands left because they didn't know what their budget was, so they couldn't offer him a contract, and he's off to Racing.
Yeah,
that happened with Jonah Holmes at the end of last season, who's ended up playing for Ealing in the Championship. He was a Welsh international, and he's in the Championship because they couldn't sort their budgets out. They lost out on some huge names. The regions had a couple of massive Southern Hemisphere players supposed to be coming to them in summer, who they lost out on because they couldn't tell them what their budgets were. And they signed that contract with Warren Gatland before they told the regions what their budgets were for next year. It's mental.
It's scary, isn't it, to think, like, so the figure's rumoured, like, so we obviously we don't know the official figure that Gatland is going to be getting, but I mean the rumours are it's around about £600,000 per year. That the 585 seems to be the kind of most regularly quoted number. I mean, that's not a kick in the bum off of a Finn Russell. And I was reading some papers recently about the impact of coaching in sports. And actually, managers, coaches, whilst they have an impact and can influence, you know, style of play, and particularly, you know, what Gatland's good is he has a very particular type of play that he wants to implement. Coaches don't actually impact results as much as they would have you think. So for the Welsh Rugby Union to be forking out 600k, which if we compare it to, well, you know, 600k is what, a tenth of the budget of Edinburgh and Glasgow, give or take, maybe a wee bit less for a national manager. And I'm sure Townsend's on not far off that as well. You know, he'll be on a decent whack as well, but yeah, it's scary, and when there's such uncertainty of funding in Wales, it's insulting, isn't it, to the players involved, and they will lose. They'll lose players and they'll lose coaches. And speaking of coaches, Craig, of course, Gatland's coming back to Wales, and we are all going to find out just how much Sean Edwards actually was the brains behind the operation.
Yeah, because Sean Edwards is just signed on for longer with France, if I'm right in saying so.
He has, he's in the contract.
So he's extended in the conversation. I listened to an interview with him, and he was saying, you know, he's open to anything. He's open to anybody talking to him, but if they're going to take the time about it, you know, he's comfortable and happy where he is, and he was offered a good deal, so he stayed on. So, you know, this whole thing of coaches. Good coaches are now looking for financial and workplace security, and you know, in club game, coaches are you know, live and die by the fans and the rugby that's played, but a lot of the international coaches are looking for, international standard coaches are looking for time to be able to develop the team, and I guess that's where, you know, Pivac has struggled with, because he's been able to work. If he works with a team on a regular basis every day, day in, day out, he can produce. Well, him and Ty Burn can produce a Pro 14 title, but I think he's struggled with bringing in all these different players and trying to get them to play his way. Whereas Gatland, for some reason, well, you know, it's not inspiring rugby that he coaches, so I suppose you can all just fit into that box really easily, you know.
Well, let's see what the future brings for Welsh Rugby. 9 months out from a World Cup, it'll be interesting to see how Gatland goes. Let's move. So we've spoke about 585,000 for Gatland. Let's move over to £750,000 a year. Eddie Jones, who has just got the can from the RFU, a year out, well, 9 months out from a World Cup, which, as you guys have already touched on, is the Eddie Jones specialty. He works in 4-year cycles. Ultimately, Jonny, like, if you look at it objectively, right, extract the World Cup from it for a second, which I know is not fair because that's kind of what he's building to. Results this year haven't been good enough. Results for quite a few years haven't been good enough for England with the resources they have and the talent they have at their disposal. Plus, the rugby has been really quite uninspiring. Surely it was a no-brainer that you had to go.
I think it's one of the most insane decisions that any rugby union's made in a very long time. I think it's absolutely bonkers. Like, for all that, yeah, he's had some not great results. The results when they matter are really good. And like, for every bad result, I saw a thing today saying Dave Rennie could win the next 43 games in a row for Australia and still not have as good a win percentage as Eddie Jones had with England. Like, his win percentage is brilliant. He wins games where it matters. The problem for him is that his man management style has run its course. I think a lot of what happened towards the end of Richard Cockerell's time at Edinburgh is what's happened in England. Like, they're just not prepared to put up with it anymore. The story that was in the Telegraph this morning about him reducing Max Malins to tears during the autumn is not something you're going to get away with as a coach at any level. Obviously, you know, we saw a bit of a bump in Edinburgh's fortunes when Cockers came in, but it doesn't last for very long. And I think Eddie Jones has just been there for long enough, trying it for long enough now that they just couldn't stand for it anymore, basically. But it's mental. Like, the money they've had to pay out to get rid of him, the money that it looks like they're going to have to pay in to get Borthwick in, who's the man they want, the way they've gone about it, the timing, the results that he's had, the World Cup performances that he's got out of them using this exact same system, it's madness. But like, I'm here for it. I'm enjoying it.
Oh yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting, Craig, thinking about the succession planning of English rugby and how quickly it's changed. Eddie Jones, when he signed his after the 2019 World Cup, they reached the final. People have kind of said that results since then haven't been great, but they did win the 2020 Six Nations. You know, yes, they finished fifth and then third in the subsequent championships, but you know, they've got a Six Nations title behind them as recently as 2020. And there was always a succession plan talked about, and obviously Rob Baxter was talked about extensively when Exeter were chomping all in front of them, and he's just signed a contract extending his time at Sandy Park. England, just from my opinion, but I really want to hear your take on this, Craig, they've really screwed the pooch here with their succession planning.
Yeah, because it's been talked about prior to the 2019 World Cup that Eddie was going to get this World Cup out the way, win it, obviously, because that's what they were saying. That's what they were saying was going to happen, and then he was going to then take 2 years to bed in a new coach, and then dance off into the sunset to America to coach rugby. So the problem you have is that it's not just the cost of paying Eddie off, because they'll have had to have paid Eddie off, and then getting Borthwick in, but it's who does Borthwick bring with him, and how much are they going? Because really, Borthwick, don't get me wrong, he's from all sides of it, all sides of the rugby team, people are very, very happy with what Steve Borthwick does. The problem is he is very much a yin and a yang. He needs somebody else in the background cuddling and squeezing and having a bit of personality in the team, whereas he's well known to be kind of just he's a personality, but he's not a personality, if you know what I mean. He's quite dour. So, is he going to bring Kevin Sinfield along with him? Is he going to bring, I've forgotten the other lad's name in Leicester, but is he going to bring those coaches with him? Because obviously Eddie Jones has decimated every single assistant coach that he's ever had in the England job. I think it was only Cockers that would probably stay around, because I think Eddie Jones would be frightened of Cockers. So, he's the only person that he'd be frightened of. But so, it'll be an interesting one to see how much it. And I totally agree with Jonny. I think replacing Eddie Jones right now, is bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. They've gone with I think all the English crowd that were booing at Twickenham, they were more booing the team rather than Eddie Jones. And then all of a sudden they've got rid of Eddie Jones and they've gone, whoa, we didn't mean that.
Whoa. Let's calm the beans here, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately for me, like Eddie Jones, obviously he's been a very divisive figure over the years, and has irked us on a number of occasions, and that is not a surprise. You would expect that of an England coach. We've often been, even the most polite man in the world, Stuart Lancaster, when he was England coach, was found his way to annoy Scotland. So they have a talent for it. Eddie, in particular, does have a very good knack for winding people up. I'm having a wee think about the evolution of that England side, though, and Eddie Jones 2019 was a bit of a shock, actually, because they hadn't had a great Six Nations. They'd had that massive run when he first started, where and you've said about the Dave Rennie stat, it's mostly generated from that, in that there was so many games they won, and they'd done 2 massive runs where
they were close to the record, weren't they?
Yeah, twice. And then they've kind of moved from there, and they've got to a World Cup final, and it was kind of in spite of, they went into the tournament with Eddie Jones. There was calls for him to be fired before that World Cup, and they go in and he does Eddie Jones magic and he gets them to the final, playing some of the best rugby I've seen from an English team in a long, long time. That semi-final against the All Blacks was magnificent. If we stand back as Scots and remove the desire for those guys in white to constantly get pummeled, it was brilliant what they done. And then South Africa tore them off the park. And Eddie Jones admitted after that final he'd made mistakes in selection. He'd kind of made mistakes in the type of player that he wanted, but then continued to make the same mistakes. And it's only in the last year that I've maybe seen a change of tact in the English selection policy. Marcus Smith's come in at the side, and I don't think that's necessarily an Eddie Jones pick. I think that's a kind of, 85% of the revenue comes from the stands RFU pick. They need someone like Marcus Smith to get behind. But, you're seeing guys like Freddie Stewart coming into that fullback role. I think he's one of the most talented rugby players England have had on their hands in generations. But you're also seeing the same old picks, the same old blockers. And for me, that's the Eddie Jones influence, where he's not evolved his team. He's not evolved his coaching to think in modern rugby. And for me, that's why, I think he probably should have stayed to the World Cup and, done all that and then be done. And I think he could probably have done relatively well with England at a World Cup. But England are stuck. If they've got Eddie Jones at the helm, they're stuck in the mire of what he wants them to do. And the way he's alienated coaches, alienated people that could influence that is telling. So for me, that's why he has to go.
He seems to have this thing as well, where if he's decided that he's no use for you, then that's it. He's decided he's no use for you. And some of the players that England have let go, and obviously because of the way they select their squads and their EQP contracts and stuff.
Yeah.
Joe Launchbury going to France, Joe Marchant going to France, Zach Mercer a couple of years ago. That's phenomenal talent.
Yeah.
That Eddie Jones has basically pushed to a position where they can't be selected for England anymore. And the Marchant one is particularly as a head scratcher, because he was a difference maker.
Yeah.
When he came, the season he played for Quins, he had a great relationship with Marcus Smith. They were right at the business end of the Premiership. He came into England and he was a breath of fresh air for England. He made Marcus Smith a better player. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's like, nah, mate, just go, it's fine. Go play in France, I don't need you. I'll never pick you. Mate.
This is the weird thing, though, or this is the thing, though. People like Marchant, I think are a good a good player for England. I don't rate Marcus Smith in an international jersey. And the issue, to justify that comment and not to anger the gods that Rugby Jesus has been questioned. What I mean about that is that Marcus Smith at Quins, when they don't have, they have a collection of coaches who all have an input, and they are well known for talking about playing what they see in front of them. Marcus Smith is in his element in that area. But the minute you start bringing rules and regulations and I want you to play this way in this part of the field, and I want you to play this way in this part of the field, as you've seen, it's absolutely knocked the corners off Marcus Smith. And so I don't think he's built for international rugby as a whole, because in international rugby, you're going to get coaches who want you to play to their specific plan. There's no way, unless you're Italy or you're Colombia or you're Chile, or you can go around to your players and say, "I tell you what, just play what's in front of you, on you go." He's not going to come across that, and so that's where the juxtaposition between Marcus Smith and Owen Farrell has really caused problems. And also, I think the having the crash ball 12 and constantly wheeling Manu Tuilangi out in his wheelchair, is wrong as well. Of Eddie Jones's pick. Eddie Jones took Marcus Smith into the international squad far too early, and because there was so much pressure on him, and he kept talking about how he doesn't pick on how a player's playing, and he picks on, he's got his reasons for how he picks players, but he started to do that because the noise has been too much from the England fans.
I mean, it's worth remembering as well. So Eddie Jones he's been given this. Obviously the press have kind of debated to death the Eddie Jones era of English rugby. It's worth remembering how he came into the role, though, Johnny. That 2015, a home World Cup under Stuart Lancaster, who's gone on to be one of the most celebrated coaches in world rugby at this point in time, obviously moving to Racing 92. Eddie Jones was the Japanese coach at the time and had agreed to go and take over the Stormers after the World Cup. And the RFU, he broke that contract to go and join England. He was with the Stormers for 8 days apparently, and the RFU had to pay 100 grand, which doesn't seem massive amount, but considering the RFU,
not now it doesn't.
No, no. And you've got this guy who's he's had success everywhere he's went, but ultimately, I mean, you're absolutely right when you say the comparison with Richard Cockerell. It's quite interesting that we would say. I think Richard Cockerell is the natural successor to him if they go down the same route, in that if they're going short termism and they want a couple of years of a shouty coach, they could go Cockerell. But I just can't see how Steve Borthwick can be. I don't think he's the messiah that the English media think, and it seems to me like Martin Johnson is jumping into my head. I know Borthwick's obviously got coaching behind him and isn't just a captain that happens to be, let's make a manager for a World Cup and watch how terrible that goes. But I just don't see how Borthwick's the answer. I think this is crazy. They're
mental.
And
again, like I've said this about Scotland before, with going in for Gregor Townsend, and then obviously there's people in Scotland starting to speak about Mike Blair already. As much as we love him around here, Pete Horn's been talked about as a Glasgow coach and then being into the Scotland setup already, and like England now doing the same thing with Borthwick, and like my overwhelming feeling is, what's wrong with coaches?
Yeah.
Like, see, instead of persistent, everyone persisted with players into coaches, into national managers, into total laughingstock. Like, let's look at some coaches. Like Vern Cotter was a coach.
Yeah.
That was like, Vern's playing career is nothing compared to his coaching career. Scott Robertson, for all we've just said, he's unproven or whatever, is a coach. Gregor Townsend is a player who became a coach. Steve Borthwick is a player who became a coach. Warren Gatland, as much as he was a player, he was never a player to the level that he was a coach. I just think that more teams should be spending more time and more resources looking at coaches to make them coaches instead of looking at players to make them coaches, because there's not a great track record for that.
And actually, Craig, it comes back to, you see it a lot in football as well, where great players don't necessarily make great coaches. And we've spoken about it with like Chris Patterson, for example. Not saying Chris Patterson isn't a very good coach, but, he obviously had a very specific skill set, and it can sometimes be really difficult for great players to pass on their skills, experience, and knowledge onto other players, because almost it can come quite naturally to them. And great players tend not to understand, not exclusively, but, a lot of the time you hear about great players, they don't necessarily understand the struggles of lesser players when they're trying to build them up to become as good as they were, or great players. It's a challenge.
Yeah, because the issue you have is a lot of these players that are world class or international class, they have a certain level of playing ability that comes naturally to them. There are certain players we know that have to work on a regular basis. You look at Duhan van der Merwe. He has come along to Scotland. He's had to work incredibly hard to get to get back to where he should be with Edinburgh. Then he's introduced into Scotland and also the Lions side of things, and everyone's saying, he's rubbish in the air, he's got bad defence, etc., etc. And then you see him playing for Scotland in the autumn internationals, and you're seeing a better defender, a better player in the air, etc. So he's had to work at it. To go down the route exactly of what you're saying about coaches, you have to understand also in that all these athletes that are playing at international level have to be pretty selfish at certain times.
Yep.
To get themselves to that level, and that doesn't always lend itself to a fantastic team ethos or recognizing different things in different players. And just as you said, John, I can do it, so why can't you? Well,
yeah, leadership is very different for a coach than it is a player. Like we see leadership in players, and we say, he's a natural leader, he's this, he's that, but it's still very self-centered and very much in the, yes, I'm working for the team, but ultimately I've got my role to play within that. Whereas we talk about coaches, actually it's managers, it's guys who have to oversee all of those soft skills. And we've talked about on the podcast a number of times about the Gregor Townsend element of those soft skills, those communication aspects that don't necessarily, he doesn't necessarily hit every time, or sometimes any times. He can be quite bad at that. So, is there right? So we've got Eddie Jones leaving. We've got Wayne Pivac out the door. Gregor Townsend has survived by lying to the Scottish fans and then bringing back Finn Russell and lying about the return of Finn Russell, because obviously we believe that actually he was coming back no matter what, but Adam Hastings took an injury. Yeah, your point, Johnny. We'll finish this section on your point. How has Gregor Townsend been the only one to survive? This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. Is the short answer. Two really good performances at the back end of the autumn is how he survived. Another one against the All Blacks, where Scotland seemed to have this thing where they, even though we ended up losing, obviously, they pull a performance out against the All Blacks that you haven't seen for a long time from Scotland. They pulled another performance out against Argentina, and that's an Argentina team like that is now not like, that's not the Argentina team of old. That's a competitive team. Yellow cards and red cards aside, that was a really good, really strong performance. But those two strong performances revolved around having Finn Russell in the team, and there was no reason not to have him in the team at the start of the autumn. So, for me, the fact that Finn came in and we put together 2 really good performances says Finn should have been in there from the start, and that shouldn't be saving Gregor Townsend's job because it was him that left him out from the start.
Yeah, and it does put a mockery on that idea, Craig, that, as I said, I get pillared online for saying Gregor Townsend could be fired after that autumn series. And, the fact Wales and England are both making changes at this point does suggest, is it simply the SRU believe Gregor Townsend is the man to not get us out the group stages at the World Cup, or do they want to? Is it a timing issue? Are they more confident that if they wait till after the World Cup, they can get the right man, Scott Robertson?
I think also, if I want to put my tinfoil hat on, you could be saying that they're wanting Tooney to go to the World Cup and fail miserably, so they don't have to pay him out anymore, any large amounts of money to get him out of the job.
True.
So I think it's more to. I've got to be honest. I think Scotland and the SRU, etc., believe in their own, in their heart of hearts, that he's the best man for the job, because they all seem to toe the same line, and you didn't have anybody from the SRU kind of scratching their head and going, "Why no Finn Russell?" And when Tooney was giving out his excuses of why he hasn't got Finn Russell in the team, they were all backing him within the SRU. So it's an odd one. But then on the other side of things, we are sitting there saying, well, if England and Wales can do it, so can Scotland. Well, do we really want to, though? And that's the big question.
Well, time will be the teller with that one, and we will see, obviously, the relative performances of the nations come the World Cup. And obviously, the Six Nations is not a million miles away, so it will be interesting. Scotland up against a Wales and an English side in transition. That this is ripe Scottish territory for a finishing bottom with a sixth place with a 40-point loss to Italy. So we shall see how it all progresses. Looking forward to it. So speaking of losses, shall we just touch a wee bit before we go into the Patreon? Shall we touch on the URC, Craig?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do that. So remind me what you said about Munster at the start of the season.
I said that Munster could be one of the Irish teams that don't make it in the top 8.
You did. I picked that out. You said Munster had the potential to have quite a poor season ahead of them.
Yeah.
Which they have so far. You've been absolutely spot on with that. And you also said, what did you say about Edinburgh?
I said Edinburgh had the potential to win it.
And what did you say after that?
What do you mean?
Because I think we said Edinburgh had the potential to win it. And then I think you doubled down on that and said, Edinburgh, we're going to win it.
Well, I've got to have a bit of positivity about me. I've got to start the season with a bit of positivity so that I don't end up doing anything silly during the mid-season. At least I'm just down at the moment.
So this was described to me the weekend. So the previous weekend was described to me as the worst Edinburgh performance of the last 2 years. This performance was described as trumping that. Apparently, it was dreadful, Craig.
I think whomever's been talking to you or whomever's been writing the headlines, I think we weren't as bad as the trip to Benetton. Benetton was just poor. I think we just didn't. We've talked about it before, but nothing went wrong, nothing went right, and we dropped every ball, or whenever we needed it to actually go to hand, we dropped it, or whenever we needed to keep a ball and not get it turned over, we turned it over. Where Edinburgh on the weekend struggled was a mixture of their substitutes coming on didn't really add anything to the game. And also, again, we had this I have to say I agreed with Tom English, and I don't tend to agree with Tom English very often when I listen to what he's got to say. But Edinburgh, where when you back Munster into a corner, they come out punching. And with Edinburgh, when you back them into a corner, they tend to just say yes or no, sir, whatever you want. And I found that is what happened. We came out punching right at the beginning, and we did a great job in the first half, and then, or well, maybe even just 20 minutes in the first half, and then Darcy got injured, and we all started to fall apart. And I have to say, and I'll say this on the rather than just in the Patreon, I'll say this right here. I have a lot of belief in Blair Kinghorn, but he did nothing to help me believe on the weekend. He maybe I was losing my religion a little bit. So yeah, it was a difficult game to watch and a difficult game to watch, because the last thing I want to do is see a smiling Peter O'Mahony, and unfortunately, we got that. Yeah,
that's fair. The problem you've got, though, Johnny, we'll come on to Glasgow in a second, but the problem you've got is, and I refer you back to Craig's comment in the group chat when the team was announced, that was a fairly full strength. I mean, Buffelli aside, a couple other names maybe, that was a fairly strong Edinburgh team, and they absolutely disintegrated in that second half.
Yeah, it's worrying from that point of view. I mean, if you have a bad day, you have a bad day. Edinburgh have had 2 in a row now, which is more of a concern. But that second half kind of made me think that the old Scottish way of falling apart in the second half, which Glasgow never really shook, but Edinburgh and Scotland seemed to kind of be shaking a little bit. Yep. It does concern me slightly that possibly it's on its way back, and I think that's something that we really, really need to avoid. We spoke 18 months, 2 years ago about Scotland's mental fragility and how a lot of that came from the clubs, because there was a point where both club sides were doing it, and I really thought that Edinburgh mostly and Scotland to an extent had started to turn the corner from that, but they seem to have been afflicted by what Glasgow have never really escaped from, which is not being able to hold their nerve, basically.
It's second half itis.
Well, it's funny because and there was a couple of moments, and for the first 20 minutes Edinburgh looked on song, and they were throwing the ball around, and we're making ground, scored a couple of nice tries. Okay, one was an intercept from Darcy, but Christine broke through the Munster lines and scored a fantastic try. And then Munster seemed to go, right, okay, this is wrong. We're doing something wrong here. I'll tell you what, we're going to go back to how Munster play, and they just ran at us. And where we struggled, and where I was very disappointed in, is that every time somebody took a ball to the line, they were getting 2 to 3 meters through the tackle, and that creates momentum. So you're already on the back foot, and Edinburgh just went to pieces every time. They'd take a line. People would come in to try and make a tackle. They were upright in the tackles. There was nobody putting any chop tackles in to put these people to ground. They were always trying to stop them and hold the ball and try to rip the ball, etc., which leads yourself to 5 meters further down the park in your own half. And that seemed to be the way it happened. And then all of a sudden, it just got to a point where they kind of went, oh, well, we're not bothered. We'll just let them run at us. And it was difficult to watch.
Edinburgh, to me, they strike me as a team just now, and this might be unfair, but I'm not meaning it to be unfair. They strike me as a team just now that seem to panic when their game plan. So whenever anyone, so you've just said, Munster just went, do you know what? Let's just do what we do, and we'll just run the ball straight and hard, and we'll see what they've got, because they're playing Edinburgh, as you rightly said. That first period of time, they played good stuff. There was a couple of good moments for them. And they've just went, you know what, how do we counter that? And Edinburgh seem to struggle, and it's probably, symptomatic of Glasgow and Scotland as well, that whenever the plan A gets countered, I don't know if the club sides have the talent within the teams, and that's no disrespect to any of the guys that are playing in those shirts. I think they struggle with when the situation changes. And, we've all identified times, particularly Scotland, where, you've had a situation change in front of you and the team haven't reacted or the team haven't adjusted their play. Referees are a great example, ref interpreting the rules one way, one day. Sometimes Scotland get left behind with that. And I just feel like Edinburgh really struggle when a team understands what they're going to do and just goes, yeah, no, you're going to have to beat us a different way today, guys. And part of that, when you're missing Buffelli, part of that comes down to you don't have a goal kicker in that team. So you can't just grind out penalties, grind out wins that way. You're going to miss kicks. You're going to struggle to just take the points, which is a whole, that's the famous Northern Hemisphere way of doing rugby in the middle of November, December, is just to grind out, a 5 penalty win. Edinburgh can't do that. Glasgow can't do that either, actually, to a certain extent, but we certainly have a higher percentage kicker. The problem for me as well, like bright spots from that Edinburgh team, right? Chris Dean was fantastic. He, again, was a shining star in that side, but you look at the other players in that team, you've got internationals across the board, and not one of them stood up and said, look, they're doing this to us. And there was an inevitability about what Munster were doing that no one stood up to.
It was definitely there was definitely an inevitability and this isn't just an Edinburgh thing. This is a Scottish rugby thing.
Yeah, it's Scottish, absolutely.
And where I was going to save this for the Patreon, but where you see the difference is we could have gone in at half time with 2 scores, Munster having to score 2 tries to get near us if Blair Kinghorn had put his kicks across.
Exactly.
Okay. So, and Edinburgh, we talk about Blair Kinghorn being a confidence player. I think Edinburgh are a confidence team.
I totally agree.
And you're and I'm if I get banished or burnt at the stake, I'm going to have to take it on the head.
Welcome to my world.
But first of all, we didn't get 2 kicks, didn't go over, so there was 6 points went a missing, and then the 2 tries that Munster scored, once in the first half, once in the second half, were both from Blair Kinghorn missing tackles.
Yeah,
glaringly obvious ones as well. And I'm not turning around and saying that this performance is all Blair Kinghorn's fault. I'm absolutely not. I'm saying that it seems to be that when we have an off day, and it's usually highlighted by Blair Kinghorn and his and how he's playing, and we talk about how he's a confidence player, and if he's not confident, things just don't go right for him. It seems to be affecting the team because the team seemed to be exactly the same thing. Things weren't going right, and Jamie Ritchie and kicking a ball out of our own try line, and putting it up and straight into a Munster player's hands. Why are we doing something like that? And so I was frustrated, and I'll talk about more frustrations about Edinburgh in the Patreon. But it was a frustrating night. And what I will say, however, and I will say to everyone at Edinburgh Rugby, they got the atmosphere fantastic that night. We were freezing cold, and they had patio heaters and different types of patio heaters all out in the player area, in the food court area, and it was a really nice atmosphere. So and plus I had a driver that night, which was great, so I could have a pint. So
always nice.
Life was good. So I'd like to thank everyone that was involved in getting the game all set up. It was really good, and hopefully it will continue over the winter time.
Yeah, so we've got a 31-18 loss for Edinburgh to Munster. Coming to confidence players, and we'll just quickly touch on this, Johnny, because I'm conscious of the time. When you cut to the BBC article of the Glasgow game, you see George Horn looking absolutely panicked that he's about to be smashed by a Zebre player. But, so, kicking, 7 out of 7 for George Horn, including some absolute screamers. His general play, some of his box kicking wasn't up to scratch, but again against Zebre, you're going to get away with that. They are I like to I'm trying to choose the right words before Patreon here, but I like to diss an Italian team. Zebre were mince. Glasgow for the first half were absolutely shocking, but then the second half, in what is anti-Glasgow style, they seem to pull it together in the second half, score some nice tries, and generally came away with a very comfortable win. George Horn was at the absolute heart of it.
Yeah, and really nice tries. I have to say, I've only watched the highlights because I make a philosophical decision never to watch any Scottish teams playing against Zebre because it's either boring or heartbreaking.
Yeah,
because we're at the stage now where Glasgow's result on Saturday is the sort of result that we should be getting against Zebre, and if we do, it's not that exciting to watch. Like, Zebre are not a good team. It's fun to score 6 or 7 tries against them, but it's not like watching someone score 6 or 7 tries against a proper team. So if the game goes the way that it by all rights should, it's a pretty boring watch because you're just watching a not very good team concede a bunch of tries. If it doesn't, it's a horrible thing to watch because you're getting battered by Zebre and they're terrible. So I do not watch full games of Scottish teams playing against Zebre. I do not understand. I don't see the point. They are the one weak spot of the URC for me because they're just not at the level of the other team.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They
And
are.
when we get bad results against them, it's horrible.
The problem, I don't know if you watched the game either, Craig, but the problem for me, again, Glasgow, really pulled away that second half. But again, a late couple of tries conceded. This seems to be a recurring theme for Glasgow, particularly in Italy. We tend to do this. Should we read into that, or is that just we're away, we're going to get a nice breakfast in the morning, and we've done our job, we've scored quite a few tries, the boys have done a job, we can switch off and they'll score a couple of tries?
Difficult because I can't take the high horse with Edinburgh in Italy or playing Italian teams, so it seems to be a Glasgow Scotland thing because Italy as a whole, Italy as an international team have given us many a scare. In fact, I think Jonny and I were in the Stadio Olimpico having to drink to try and wait on, I think it was Grieg Laidlaw that actually saved our horses that day. And I think I think we all seem to struggle with Italian teams, and I would like, I like the sort of the Johnny's entitlement there, saying, we should be beating these teams. We're the sort of team we should be beating these teams. But the problem I have is that history does not show that either Glasgow or Edinburgh should be beaten. And this is the problem. We have the personnel. We seem to cop the ball on a regular basis when we go and play Italian teams lately, especially.
I mean, I would probably counter that by saying history probably does say that both Edinburgh and Glasgow should be beating Zebre.
I think what a lot of people don't seem to be fully bought into yet is that we can't say Italian teams anymore, I don't think, because Benetton have moved on in the last couple of years in a way that Zebre just haven't. Like, Zebre still are not a good team.
Yeah, they are poor. So here's a stat for you. So the Glasgow away to Zebra in the URC Pro 14, Pro 12. So the games Glasgow have played against Zebra. So away is where you'd expect Zebra to be at their most dangerous against Glasgow. 10 matches. What have we got? 10 wins. Well, it's now 11 wins. 8 try bonus points. It's now 9 try bonus points and 48 points out of 50. So, to say that we shouldn't be expecting to beat Zebra, the stats bear difference to that. Benetton, I think, are a different side. But back to the point I made with you last week, Craig, I think that if we're going to make statements like we want to be in playoffs, we want to be top 4, we want to be winning the title, Benetton are a team you need to be dispatching with a 5-point win.
Oh, yeah. Listen. I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, we should be afraid. We should be afraid." Yeah. I'm just saying that when we have our gander up, when we think that we're going to do this and that and the other, and people like some stupid people think you're going to win that think their team's going to win the Pro 14 of the URC. You've always got a wee Italian team sitting at the background, so you think. And so that's my concern. We always seem to manage as a Scottish teams nation as such. We regularly trip over an Italian team at some point.
Well, why don't we take this one over to the Patreon where we can properly cut loose about what we actually think about Italian rugby and many other things. Thank you everyone that's joined us tonight. We're going to head over to our pay for section now. If you're coming over to join us, we'll be delighted to have you. But for now, it is goodbye from me and goodbye from Jonny and Craig.
Bye all.
Bye all.